Hey mamas, you're listening to the Balanced Working Mama podcast, the only podcast teaching you how to balance your work, motherhood, and wellness. I am Dr. Amber Thornton, clinical psychologist and mama wellness consultant. Each week we dive into tips and strategies and much more so that you too can become a balanced working mama. Let's dive in. Hey mamas, welcome to another episode of the Balanced Working Mama podcast. I'm Dr. Amber, and I hope you all are doing amazing. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. If this is not your first time, hey girl, welcome back. I am so excited to talk with you all today because I actually want to do a little bit of a recap of an episode that we shared last week. And so if you have been tuning in, following along weekly, you know that last week we shared an episode with Tamika about her experience of being a married single mom, a default parent, but then ultimately one that led to a separation and then a divorce. And I hope that you enjoyed that episode because I think that episode really was important. One, because Tamika has come so far, you all. I have known Tamika for a little bit. She was a member of our Balanced Working Mama community. I have been able to really watch her grow. But then also to be a part of her story was really very humbling for me. So it was important because Tamika was ready to share that story because as you can tell in the interview, it was a painful process for her and it was full of ups and downs, but she has definitely come out on the other end better and just really more tapped in. Not to say that there are not any challenges anymore, but however, she is able to really take care of herself in a different way and has been able to find a new version of motherhood and balance that feels so much more healthy for her and her daughter. I will be honest with you. When I first did this interview with Tamika, I knew it needed to be shared, but I also was a little bit hesitant to share because I know that some of you are going through a journey where you are trying to undo default parenting. And I want to make a few things clear, and that's why we are doing a debrief of this episode. There will be some of you who, as you go through your journey of trying to undo default parenting, you will realize that this is a journey that you need participation from your partner for. And some of you then may realize that your partner is not willing to participate fully in this process with you. And then some of you will have to decide, okay, am I still able to live a life that feels healthy, that feels whole, that feels fulfilling and satisfying for me, all the while realizing that I am not getting the support and the cooperation from my partner? I think that is important because there is a spectrum here of what can happen when we are in those situations, right? For some, it may just shift the dynamics of the relationship a little bit, and it can be something that you can live with. For others, it might mean, wow, this is not going to work. So we really need to talk about what this means for our relationship. And for others, similar to Tamika's story, you might realize as you're going through this process, as you're listening to this interview series, that this was a little bit more than just default parenting, and rather you were in an experience where you actually were not getting your needs met, were being invalidated, emotionally abused, things that are just a lot more serious. So while Tamika's story may not be representative of everyone's story, I do think that there is something that everyone can get out of this story because it will help you to identify what may be happening for you in your experience of motherhood and being a wife, being a partner, and help you to know what is it that you can tolerate and what is it that you have to say no more to. And this is exactly what Tamika has done with her story. So as you all probably noticed, Tamika's story is going to be divided into parts. There are 3 parts to her story. Last week, you were able to listen to part 1. And so right now, I just want to recap and talk about some highlights in that part 1. So again, if you haven't gone back to listen to Tamika's story, go back. I believe it is episode 96 and really listen to her story because this is what we're going to talk about today in this episode. Also, I love doing recaps. I love doing debriefs. And this is part of me that definitely reflects the psychologist that I am. A lot of times when we go through things that are challenging, when we go through things that may be emotionally heavy, you gotta stop and pause and just really like be like, okay, yo, what just happened? You gotta really reflect and debrief with someone or yourself to really allow the information to just like seep in, for you to be able to process what happened and integrate it, and then determine what that means for you in next steps, right? And so that's what we're doing today. Today is like a debrief. So let's just talk about some of the things that came up in part one of Tamika's interview. So I have 4 points that I want to talk about today. And the first one is that you probably heard us talking about her being a married single mom. I had never heard of that concept until, I would say, a few months ago. I was on Instagram and stumbled upon a reel of another podcast, completely different from my podcast. But in a segment of that podcast, they were talking about the married single mom. And I actually remixed that reel and talked about, what that meant for me, or what came up for me. Excuse me. Excuse me, y'all. I'm recovering from bronchitis, y'all. I'm finally on the end of it, but oh my gosh. Anyways, married single mom. And so I wanted to really draw out that concept, especially in Tamika's story, because I think that the concept is actually pretty similar to what it might feel like to be a default parent. But I think the term married single mom is definitely much more extreme, right? A married single mom is essentially someone who is married or partnered. You maybe have been for a long time, but within that marriage, you are operating as a single mother. And so that implies that your partner, typically male partner in these situations, is just not giving the effort, giving the support, giving the things that the family needs for you to feel supported and actually partnered in your relationship, right? And so that is exactly what Tamika was experiencing. She was experiencing this dynamic where, on paper, to the public's eye, when they would go out, she's married because she has this partner, this person who seemingly is supposed to take care of her, support her, help to raise their child. However, behind closed doors, Tamika knew that she was a married single mom. Things were different. She was a default parent, right? And so I want you, if you're listening to this and any of Tamika's story resonated with you, I want you to think about, is that something you identify with, this concept of a married single mom? Or do you know someone who has gone through that experience, right? I think that anytime you may be feeling like you are a married single mom, that is a big red flag. And I want you to really take time to really think to yourself and consider and reflect, is this something that we can move on from? Is this something that we can undo? So, for instance, does it mean that we have to engage in some of the Undoing Default Parenting series or some of the strategies provided to make sure that I am no longer feeling like a single mother within my marriage? Because that's not okay. Okay, I want to talk about a second point. And Tamika brought this up in the interview, this idea that, her partner assumed that she just had this natural maternal instinct because she was a woman, because she had the child, right? I think we hear this a lot, this bias that because you are a mother or because you are a woman, you will naturally have this natural instinct that is just like, "Whoo, I know everything to do when it comes to raising a child. I know everything my child needs just naturally. It's just instinctual inside of me." I want us all today to just be clear that that is a myth. And while there might be many women or many people who actually just might be more naturally intuitive, right? There may be a natural instinct for some of you. I want to be clear that that is not an innate guaranteed thing for every single woman who has a child. Okay. And so, because what happens if we have this bias that there's just a natural maternal instinct, that means or implies that, well, she doesn't need as much support because she just knows, right? Or what can happen in a partnership or a relationship is, well, you do it better because you're just natural at it, right? Well, you should do it more because it just comes more natural to you. I don't have that natural instinct. And how many of you have been put in that situation where there's something happening with your child, or there's something that your child needs, and the fingers are pointed to you because you have the natural instinct, quote unquote, the natural maternal instinct. I think that this is a bias that individual people have, and it can show up in our marriages and our partnerships. But I also think it's a societal burden that is placed upon women that then leads us to not receive as much support. Because if something is just natural, you don't need help, right? And so I think we need to really let go of that belief that there's a natural instinct, and rather becoming a parent, becoming a mother, becoming a father requires new skills, new learning that we both have to develop. In that development process, that process of becoming a parent is hard for everyone involved. And so it means that everyone is needing support. Everyone is needing help. Everyone needs compassion. Everyone needs patience and grace, right? Because there's no such thing as a natural maternal instinct. Rather, these are skills that any person can learn to care for a child. Okay. And when Tamika talked about that, that's essentially what happened for her. Her partner assumed that she had a natural maternal instinct, and she also had bought into that belief, which then led to this misbalance in who was caring for the child, because she has a natural maternal instinct, which we now know is false. Okay, you all, let's talk about a third point. You all, I apologize for all the coughing that's happening on this episode. I promise you, moving forward, this will not be happening. Third point: default parenting versus abusive marriage. That's exactly what I wrote down, because I believe that there is a spectrum. I believe that there is a continuum, right? And I want to point this out because, again, I want to make it clear. I want to be very, very clear about the intentions behind sharing this interview. This interview is not to say, if you are in a position where you're realizing you're a default parent in your home, that you're automatically in an abusive relationship. That may not be the case. And for most individuals, most couples, most partnerships, that isn't the case at all. And rather, it is two people operating in a way that they have been socially conditioned or culturally conditioned to do parenthood, to do partnership, to do marriage. And we now know, as a generation who's trying to undo generational curses and undo things that are no longer serving us, we know that being so rigid along those cultural or social lines when it comes to gender just may not be the best option, right? And so for most of us, if we are in a default parent role, it is because we or our partners are operating in this way that was socially, culturally normative. And now we need to undo. However, there is a handful of other people, other women, who are in a default parent role because there might be some other things at the foundation or at the core of the marriage that could be unhealthy, that could be traumatic, that could be really detrimental to the long-term health of the individual. And we're talking about emotional abuse. We're talking about mental abuse. Sometimes we're talking about physical abuse. In Tamika's story, luckily, she did not speak of any physical abuse that occurred, but she absolutely identified some emotional abuse. She absolutely identified some mental abuse. She absolutely identified some of those red flags that we often see that lead to the cycle of abuse within a relationship. And her being a default parent or a married single mom was really a symptom of that, right? So for you all, as you're listening to this, I actually want you to think about this. If you are in a default parent role, is this a condition that is happening because there maybe needs to be some more learning, some more skills developed for your partner, or some unlearning on your part to allow there to be a better shift in the partnership? Or is this default parent role that you're in a sign or a symptom of something bigger, of something deeper, right? If you are trying to undo default parenting and you are constantly getting resistance, if you are constantly getting pushback, if you feel that you are constantly being invalidated, if it feels like you are trying your best, but you are being unheard, ignored, there might be something there. And so, for those of you, if you're feeling like that's where I've been and I'm just really not sure what to do about it, I want you to continue to listen to the additional parts of this interview because I think it can give you some insight on what may need to happen next. Okay. Lastly, last point, how do you know when you need to make a change? This was something that Tamika really started to hit on, and I want you all to continue to listen to the series, the next few parts of our episodes, because I think you will start to get a sense of, do I need to make a big change within my marriage, within my partnership, or is this something that we can tackle together as a unit by unlearning and relearning some skills so that there is more balance within our home? Okay. All right, you all, I am so excited for this interview series. If you enjoyed this, please rate, review, comment on the YouTube episode, on the actual podcast episode. Reach out to me and let me know if you want more interviews from real moms going through things like this. We absolutely can do more of that. But I hope that this episode was a good addition to the other one, just to help you understand and really conceptualize what was happening in that episode and what it means for you. Okay, I will talk to you all soon. Hey mama, thank you for listening to the Balanced Working Mama podcast. If you love this podcast, please be sure to rate it and share it with another mama that you know. And don't forget to follow me and Balanced Working Mama on Instagram. I'll talk to you soon.